Hey, welcome back. This is video 11, I think, in our series, and just still fighting wind and different elements out where I'm at. And so I move around from location to location, and today it's a little breezy. And the sun's really bright today, which is great. I'm bringing all the dandelions and thinking about making some dandelion jam and playing around with some of that, and just kind of a neat morning. Got a bunch of basic stuff to do. Got to mow, got to do all those things, but beautiful start to the day. We are on the next half of the book, really. We're over halfway through, but we've gone through. We concluded the speeches and discourses and summed up all those speeches. And then we talked last video about the narrator comes in and he pauses everything and says, looking at all these things, where does true wisdom come from? And then it concludes that wisdom is the fear of the Lord, and then understanding is forsaking evil. And then there's this anticipation that the next part of the play, or the next part of the story, is going to reveal the answer to that question. And so today it's unique. It's this is the first monologue in this portion. It's Job sharing three kind of segments. His first one is he speaks of his former blessings and his honor that he received, his just his former life, and he's grieving that. He's remembering it. He's recalling all of the things that, impacted his life. He's recalling these moments of praise, these moments of honor, these moments of his authority and his position and his wealth, his family. He takes a minute to just recall everything, and he takes a minute to grieve, and then he just capitalizes on that anguish and just gut level shares his heart. And then he defends again his innocence before God. But he also says, in the midst of this, he talks a little bit about, if his uprightness, he's like, truth matters. God looks out for the orphans and widows. If I have not been loyal to my spouse in marriage, if I have not let these other things happen, he's saying I've maintained my integrity. I have been faithful to my wife. I have been faithful to my family. I've been faithful to the Lord because I've not cheated anybody. I've not withheld from those who need it. God himself vindicates and looks after the orphan and widow. How could I dare stand up against him? So there's these elements that Job brings to the table in his defense today that are profound. And as we read through there, maybe there are some things that you are grieving. And my prayer is that as we go through these next few sections, these monologues, we'll have touched on something in your heart or your life. And there's been things in this whole entire series that have really impacted me personally about what God is up to behind the scenes, and that he's trustworthy and he has a plan. And as we go through this content today, Job realizes God's hand must be at work, and he's again redefending everything. He's just pouring it all out on the table. And so I want you to listen to Job as he just spills his guts to everybody. He just lets it all out. It's a monologue. It's 3 chapters long. He just kind of, the first part, and they're pretty well easily to categorize. You can kind of see how they clearly are separated about his former life, his present dishonor, his present anguish, and then concluding with his innocence. So we're going to read through this, and then afterward, there's a few things from here that we'd want to maybe touch on really quickly, and then we'll move on. Chapter 29. We're really close here. Job continued speaking. I long for the years gone by, when God took care of me, when he lit up the way before me, when I walked safely through the darkness, when I was in my prime. God's friendship was felt in my home. The Almighty was still with me. My children were all around me. My cows produced milk in abundance. My groves poured out streams of olive oil. Those were the days when I entered the city gate. I took my place among the honored leaders. The young stepped aside when they saw me. Even the aged rose in respect in my coming. The princes stood in silence and put their hands over their mouths. The highest officials of the city stood quietly while holding their tongues in respect. All who heard me praised me. All who saw me spoke well of me. For I assisted the poor in their need, the orphans who required help. I helped those without hope, and they blessed me. And I caused the widows' hearts to sing for joy. Everything I did was honest. Righteousness covered me like a robe, and I wore justice like a turban. I served as eyes for blind. I served as feet for the lame. I was a father to the poor. I assisted strangers who needed help. I broke the jaws of godless oppressors and plucked their victims from their teeth. I thought, surely I will die surrounded by my family after a long, good life. For I am like a tree whose roots reach the water, whose branches are refreshed with the dew. New honors are constantly bestowed on me, and my strength is continually renewed. Everyone listened to my advice. They were silent as they waited for me to speak. And after I had spoke, they had nothing to add. For my counsel satisfied them. They longed for me to speak as people long for rain. They drank my words like a refreshing spring rain. When they were discouraged, I smiled at them. My look of approval was precious to them. Like a chief, I told them what to do. I lived like a king among his troops and comforted those who mourned. But now, this is chapter 30, you can see how clearly they're separated. But now I am mocked by people younger than I, by young men whose fathers are not worthy to run with my sheepdogs. A lot of good they are to me, those worn-out wretches. They are gaunt with hunger and flee to the deserts, to desolate and gloomy wastelands. They pluck wild greens from among the bushes and eat from the roots of the broom trees. They are driven from human society, and people shout at them as if they were thieves. So now they live in frightening ravines, in caves and among the rocks. They sound like animals howling among the bushes, huddled together beneath the nettles. They are nameless fools, outcasts from society. And now they mock me with vulgar songs. They taunt me, and he's saying these are the people that I helped. They mock me with vulgar songs. They taunt me. They despise me, won't come near me, except to spit in my face. For God has cut my bowstring. He has humbled me. So they have thrown off all restraint. These outcasts oppose me to my face. They send me sprawling, and they lay traps in my path. They block my road and do everything they can to destroy me. They know I have no one to help me. They come at me from every direction. They jump on me when I'm down. I live in terror now. My honor has blown away in the wind, and my prosperity has vanished like a cloud. All his former glory is gone, never to return. Under his understanding, he does not believe any of this is ever going to come back. And he's sorrowful. And now my life seeps away. Depression haunts my days. All night my bones are filled with pain, which gnaws at me relentlessly. With a strong hand, God grabs my shirt. He grips me by the collar of my coat and throws me into the mud. I'm nothing more than dust and ashes. I cry to you, O God, but you don't answer. I stand before you, but you don't even look. You have become cruel toward me. You use your power to persecute me. You throw me into a whirlwind and destroy me in that storm. And I know you are sending me to my death, the destination of all who live. Surely no one would turn against the needy when they cry for help in their trouble. So he's talking a little bit here about what would be terribly wrong, and he's saying, I've never done this. Surely no one would turn against the needy when they cry for help in their trouble. Did I not weep for those in trouble? Was I not deeply grieved for the needy? So I looked for good, but evil came instead. I waited for the light, but darkness fell. My heart is troubled and restless. Days of suffering torment me. I walk in gloom without sunlight. I stand in the public square and I cry for help. Instead, I am considered a brother to jackals and a companion to owls. My skin is turned dark, my bones burn with fever, my heart plays sad music, and my flute accompanies those who weep. He's an outcast. He's fitting in with all the outsiders, those he's helped. They persecute him. Now he's mocked by the same people that his heart has been to help them. And now his final protest of his innocence. I made a covenant with my eyes, not to look at a young woman, for what has God above chosen for us? What is our inheritance from the Almighty on high? Isn't it a calamity for the wicked and a misfortune for those who do evil? Doesn't he see everything I do and every step that I take? Have I lied to anyone? Have I deceived anyone? Let God weigh me on his scales of justice, for he knows my integrity. If I have strayed from his pathway, or if my heart has lusted for what my eyes have seen, if I am guilty of any other sin, then let someone else eat my crops I have planted. Let all that I have planted become uprooted. He casts it all out. I don't even need it. He said, if I'm guilty of this, let everything I possess and have and would ever have, let it all be gone. If my heart has been seduced by a woman, or if I've lusted after my neighbor's wife, then let my wife belong to another man. Let another man sleep with her. For lust is a shameful sin, a crime that should be punished. It is a fire that burns all the way to hell. It would wipe out everything I own. He said that lifestyle often brings disaster with it. So he says, I haven't done it. If I've been unfair to my male or female servants, then they brought their complaints to me. How could I face it to God if I didn't deal justly with them, is what he's implying. What could I say when he questioned me? For God created both me and my servants. He created us both in the womb. Job is a beautiful representation here of this unbiased nature. He's not, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't matter if you're black, you're white, you're male, female, servant, slave, free. Like it's not necessarily a tolerance. It's a recognition God made us both. We are all created in his image. Not tolerance. It's a recognition of their identity in God. God made them in his image, just like he made me. He says, how can I dare treat them that way before God? How could I face God knowing what I know? He's not racist. Have I refused to help the poor? Have I crushed the hopes of widows? Have I been stingy with my food and refused to share it with orphans? No, from my childhood I have cared for orphans just like my father. And all my life I have cared for the widows. Whenever I saw the homeless without clothes and the needy with nothing to wear, did they not praise me for providing wool clothing to keep them warm? He said, it's evidence. Look, they're wearing everything I gave them. And I didn't hold back. If I raised my hand against an orphan, knowing the judges would take my side, then let my shoulder be wrenched out of place. Look what he's wishing upon himself. He said, if I have done this, rip my arm out. I'll give my left arm. You've heard maybe people say that. He's like, rip it out of its socket. Let my arm be torn from its socket. That would be better than facing God's judgment. For if the majesty of God opposes me, what hope is there for me here? And what hope is for me there, rather, in the presence of God? He said, if the judgment here is that bad, just think of what it'll be when I stand before God. He's not holding back his good from those he's able to help. Verse 24 of 31, have I put my trust in money or felt secure because of my gold? Have I gloated about my wealth and all that I own? The implication of these questions is the answer is no. He hasn't done any of those things, and he's pleading his case. He's suggesting that these are things that he's maintained in his entire life that God was pleased with. So when we look at this and they said there's nobody like this man in the land, there's nobody like him, he's completely blameless, he's upright. These are some characteristics. If you have been looking at your life and thinking, what is a man? What is God pleased with? And you see the way that this man has lived out his life, you see the things that I care about that are pleasing to God, it's a wonderful life to emulate. Anyway, side note. Verse 26, have I looked at the sun shining in the skies or the moon walking down its silver pathway? And have I ever been secretly enticed in my heart to throw kisses at them in worship? Like idolatry. If so, I should be punished by the judges, for it would mean that I have denied the God of heaven. Have I ever rejoiced when disaster struck my enemies? Have I ever become excited when harm came their way? No, I have never sinned by cursing anyone or by asking for revenge. My servants have never said, he lets everybody go hungry. I never turned away a stranger, but I have opened my doors to everyone. Have I tried to hide my sins like other people do, concealing my guilt in my heart? Have I feared the crowd or contempt of the masses so that I kept quiet and stayed indoors? If only someone would listen to me. Look, I will sign my name to my defense. Let the Almighty answer me. Let my accusers write out the charges against me. I would face that accusation proudly. I would wear it like a crown, for I would tell him exactly what I have done. I would come before him like a prince. If my land accuses me and all its furrows cry out together, or if I have stolen its crops or murdered its owners, then let thistles grow on the land instead of wheat and weeds instead of barley. And that's where he ends. And then this next guy, Elihu, we're introduced to a brand new character in the story. He's a young guy, and he just talks and talks and talks and talks and talks. I think sometimes people think that of me as well. But in the end of this video, at the end of the conclusion of Job's monologue, we get to wrestle with his defense, that we know from the end of the story that everything he said is true. But he's pleading his case, and we can clearly see what a beautiful life he had. I mean, everywhere he went, he said princes would cover their mouths when I spoke in honor and representation of him. Like he was very well respected in society. This character in this story is playing the lead role. He is a man's man. He's everybody's hero. And then all of a sudden this hero somehow has tragically fallen, and everybody thinks it's because of some evil that he did. And yet he's 100% innocent, and he's maintained his integrity, and it's all tragic. He is full of sorrow. He's like, now I'm dishonored. Like the same intensity that I had of this honor is now mirrored in the same intensity in the opposite of dishonor and tragedy. He says like it's equally horrible. Like he's faced with death. The people that he desired to help hate him. The young people, they no longer. He said, I'm without any type of defense. They see that I'm down. They kick me when I'm down. They jump on me when I'm down. Job never did any of those things, and yet he's suffering from this. And you begin to really identify with Job here. It's like, this is evil. This is horrible. How can he be treated like that? A man who's done so many wonderful things for so many people. There's a lot of history here. Depending on the time period that it really was, like it could be 100+ years that he had been living this way, or maybe a little less, but he had spent his entire life as a wonderful person, helping everybody, not holding back anything, not being guilty of any charge. And I don't know how you can relate to this today, thinking back. Maybe you have some former glories. You've been living on your laurels. You've been thinking like the best years are behind me, and failing to see that God's purposes in the present, whatever we're going through, whatever we're faced with, whatever tragedy, it's the reminder that he sees us. There's a passage in the, I believe it's in Genesis, and Abraham and Sarah, they're unable to conceive a child. This is the way back here. We're talking about, God's promise to his people before Israel became a nation. And this is the start of it all with Abraham and Sarah. And God's promises weren't coming about. So he slept with his handmaid, or basically his servant girl, Hagar. She conceived, had a son. And then eventually God his promise was fulfilled in Sarah, and they had another child. And then Sarah got upset with Hagar, sent him out, and they sent him away basically to die in the desert together. How tragic! I mean, that was a horrible story to begin with, and how that all came about. But while she's out there and she's dying, she's watching her son die. She puts him off to the side, doesn't want to see it happen, doesn't want to see him die, and she's just thirsty and hungry and all that. And then God reveals himself to Hagar. It reveals himself to her as Jehovah El Roi, the God who sees you. That in our worst, God, she was cast out. She was, mistreated, left to die. And God saw. I love that in this moment too, that God is watching. He said, have you considered my servant Job? There's nobody like him. God already knew the report. He already knew who he was. He'd been watching. I don't think for a second that God stops watching us, that his eye is always on us in the best way possible. If you're a Lord of the Rings fan, you think the eye is watching, not that kind of eye, the eye of Sauron. This is the eye of God that is watching, and it is not burning with fire on all of us. It is watching with anticipation and hope and invitation, to trust him, to come to him. The greatest thing, if we are his, and he has revealed himself to us, and we accept him, we receive his forgiveness, we receive his grace, we receive his purposes for our life, we will have the greatest joy, the greatest peace, the greatest hope, the greatest future. God will, at the end of the day, you and I and those who commit to him and trust him for that are going to have that reward. We're going to share in that blessing. We're going to be vindicated. We're going to be fulfilled and satisfied. And with that hope, and I think this is the same hope and I think we'll come to that conclusion, the same hope that Job has been holding on to all along. He said, I'm writing down everything. I'm writing down your words. I'm writing down my words. We're going to God. And then at the end of the day, let him have the final say. Even if you don't let him, he's going to have the final say. And what I'm encouraged by that is we don't have to be afraid to live the life that God has called us to live now. That we can be sacrificial givers, that we can give of our time and energy, that we can pursue the causes that he cares about, knowing that it's going to come about. Like you can cast off that fear of being wounded by people, like, oh, they're just going to take advantage of me. Probably. It's possible. It's likely, but God is watching. God sees you. God sees your heart. He will reward you in due season. And the kind of people that God is calling us to be. God approved of Job. He already said this. He's pointed him out. He's got a target on his back. But God is saying that there's nobody like this man. This video series is intended to be a men's group video. There is something, I think, in every man, especially who's watching this video, who's heard through these stories and looked through there's something in all of us that will see this kind of man, and we cannot help but feel honor and respect for that kind of person. And we can't help but want to emulate the characteristics that God is pleased with. And my prayer is, as we've been going through here, that he said, let all my fields go to rot. Let all this happen. I'd rather stand in full knowledge that God, I'm in his approval. I could care about nothing less. One of these days, I will stand before him naked. I entered this world naked. I'm going to leave this world naked. All I had, he gave from me. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That was his response in the beginning. It's still there. Regardless of what happens in our life, our response to the grief, the hurts, our hangups, our habits, all the things that we've gone through, our response should come out as, God gives, God takes away. May his name be praised. In the end, I'm going to leave here naked. I came here naked. I can't take any of it with me. So what he's given me now, praise him. Trust him. Lean on him. In the midst of some of our darkest moments when God is seemingly silent, and in Job's story in the situation, God is seemingly silent. Everything is distorted by all the sounds around him. He's got his friends' psychological warfare. He's got his pain, his suffering, his former glories that are all in shambles. He's forced to lie looking at his life's work ruined and all is rubble as if it just been burned by fire. Imagine you're in that situation looking at something that you have gone through and you're looking at rubble. All of your life's efforts have come to nothing and you are broken. And now you look forward and you don't see that hope. You don't see that future. You don't see God's plan at work. But what God sees in us and that potential in those moments to mirror his character. It's easy to love and serve God when everything's going great. I've been in those moments when life is perfect and everything is going my way. And in the very next moment, everything crumbles and everything is down. And you look back on that and you think, like, it's over. But God gives us the strength to endure, and he pulls us out of that and begins to show us and reveal there's still more. And you can trust me, no matter what you go through, this promise, I will never leave you, I will never forsake you. There will come a day. And we're getting to that point at the end of the story. But I pray you hang in there. I pray you know that at the end of the day, it's going to be okay. Hang in there just a little bit longer, a little bit longer. God's got something for you. I don't know what that something is, but I know that his plans and his purposes prevail, and his plans and purposes are pure. They are good. They are perfect. And if we can submit to him and trust him in that, he's going to do something beautiful with whatever it is that you're going through. So I want to close on that thought, close in prayer, considering maybe your former glories this week, considering, what it is that you're faced with, and then ultimately pleading this case to God. Bring it to God. He hears you. He will listen. Let him touch your heart. Let him give you direction for what you've got coming up next, the kind of person he is calling you to be, and trust him that he can help you with it. You're not alone. God, thank you for your presence today. Thank you for your peace, your purposes that prevail. God, I love that prevailing nature of your spirit, that no matter what, you're unconquerable, you're immovable, you're unstoppable. God, you're all powerful, you're almighty, and it's great to be reminded of that you are going to win no matter what. And none of this takes you by surprise. None of this is at all a threat to you. There are no threats that can stand up against you. Job has said so accurately, so many times throughout this story, who can stand before the Almighty? There is no threat too great that would even begin to make you nervous. So God, I'm so thankful for those understandings about you through Scripture, that we've come to this understanding. Help us to rest in that. Help us to trust you, even when we can't hear or see or perceive what you're doing. God, if there are those this video watching this time watching this video, and they're thinking, my former days of glory are gone, my best life is done, would you speak to those individuals right now saying, no, you have no idea the plans I have for you that are good, to prosper you, not to harm you, give you hope in a future. And that God, that we could commit to those plans 100% and say, God, whatever you have, bend me to your will, use me to your liking. And Jesus, you said that if we lose our life for your sake, we find it. If we hold on to this life with all that we have and forsaking yours, we really lose all that is the life that you have chosen for us. And we lose the best potential of life by holding on and clinging to everything, all the things around us. So help us not to trust in those things. Help us to trust in you, your plans, your purposes that do prevail. And we thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you guys. I hope that's some food for thought today. And may it encourage you, may it bless you, and go in God's grace and peace today.